My name is Bappaditya Mukhopadhyay. I'm going to take you through a brief presentation on analytics landscape. What we are going to discuss today is what is analytics all about, how does one go about solving problems, what it means to solve problems in analytics, and how is this program going to help you achieve that. I'm going to give you a very brief rundown on the various things on the program, the various modules which we have designed, how we plan to cover some of the domains in the module, and as well as the things which we cover and what's the optimum way to get the maximum out of the program. There are 4 basic stages when we are trying to solve any problem in analytics. The first stage is always the problem formulation. The second stage is the data gathering linked to the problem formulation. The third stage is where we do the data analysis, and in the last stage, we try and figure out how to implement whatever solutions which we propose. The problem formulation, I think, is probably the most important part of all the 3, and that's partly because that's the portion which we are not going to do in this program, because that's the portion which we don't think we can do in any program. Problem formulation will typically start with a brief which either the client is going to give or something which you will propose for the client. So let me kind of therefore give a very brief backdrop of the 3 types of analytics firms which we see in India and also outside of India, which I'm going to classify them are the captive analytics firms. For example, American Express. They were the first ones to be doing analytics in this country or even globally, and they have a very strong analytics team. And they don't do analytics for any other clients. They're only doing it for American Express, who is their client. Now, the kind of challenges they face is very different from the kind of challenges which other analytics firms faces. For example, the problem formulation for the American Express as an analytics client, analytics firm is not very challenging or is not very difficult, in the sense that they have a well-defined business line and they are trying to get better and better at it. The challenge for them, however, is that a lot has been done. The improvements can at the best be marginal, and yet one has to improve. So that's one type of firms which I call the captive analytics firm. There are second type of analytics firms which are not captive, but they have a lot of clients and they are trying to solve their problems. I would definitely put firms like eValueServe or maybe MuSigma or even MuSigma in that category, who do not have any captive clients, but they do pitch for clients and they try to solve their problems. And for them, the problem formulation is very important, because the client will come up with a problem which is very loosely unstructured. It could be as simple as increase my sales, or make sure that if I send a million mailers, I get a good response rate. These firms have to primarily spend time, how do I convert this unstructured problem to a solvable way? That's the second kind of firm. The third kind of firms are probably the ones who are definitely doing much more challenging, and those are the ones whom we read about and aspire to be. They don't have a captive client. In fact, they don't have clients, but they kind of develop products, and once they have developed the products, they go and hit the market, and then they find clients who would be willing to associate with their product. Now, the reason I am making a distinction between these 3 firms or 3 types of analytics firms are, for the first group, the problem is already well defined. You are trying to get better in how to solve it. For the second group, the client is well defined. The client knows the problem very well, but the client may not be able to formulate the problem the way you want it. And therefore, the challenge for you is to be able to formulate that and ensure that your data science team can work on it. For the third group, there is no client, there is no captive audience, there are no captive clients, and therefore what you are trying to do is you are trying to think or anticipate that what could be an excellent product and where can it be used, and then your data science team is basically working on that product. The problem formulation is something, where do you learn? My simple answer is you don't learn it anywhere. You keep your ears and eyes open, you read as much as you can, you figure out how do people solve some problems, what kind of data do they use, and you just get better at it. I don't think we can have any structured program which teaches you how does one formulate problems and solve it. What we can do, or what we end up doing in any structured program, are the second two stages. One is the data gathering part, and the other is the analysis of that. So let me give a brief about what does data gathering mean in an analytics industry. When we are doing data gathering, traditionally there would be two types of data which we would be using. One would be the primary data, and the second would be the secondary data. The primary data is one where you would go do survey. There is no data available, you just generate the data by asking questions. It could be a structured questionnaire, it could be a unstructured questionnaire, but essentially what you're trying to find out is gathering as much of information, and then try to figure out what to do with that information. For example, you want to find out if there are if there is a car model which is available in 4 color types: red, blue, black, and white, and you want to find out what kind of colors do people prefer. What you do is you do a large part of market survey, and you just ask them what kind of colors car do you prefer, and just try to do a socio-demographic mapping to say, these are the type of people who prefer this kind of color. So that would be primary data collection. The second type of data collection would be what is the secondary data, or the transaction data. Now, if I look at the same problem, and if I want to find out that what kind of colored card do people like, if I'm working with secondary data, I don't actually go and ask people what kind of colored card do you like. Instead, what I do is I just find out the percentage of cards with different colors being sold and what kind of people are buying them. And because people have transacted or revealed what they have done, I'm going to use that data to infer maybe people from this particular background are more likely to buy this kind of card. Now, obviously, these are the two traditional ways when we looked at analytics. The challenge for the first one was essentially that the collecting the data is a huge problem. It's time consuming, it's costly, and especially which we are doing if we are trying to do in a country which is as diverse as India. By the time you start collecting your data and by the time you finish, so many things would have changed that the data collected in the first phase may not be relevant at all by the time you finish the study. This is leaving aside the cost of collecting and the cost of administering the questionnaire and the other costs associated with that. But the advantage is that you could virtually get any information which you want because you are the one who is going to create the data. When it comes to the secondary data, the advantage again of secondary data is that obviously it is far less costly. You don't have to go and visit places or small units to collect the data. The data is usually in a very relatively what we call a clean form. But again, the problem with the secondary data is that your analysis is going to be limited to the fields on which the data was gathered, because you are not the one who is collecting the data, and therefore you have no flexibility in trying to get new information which is not there in the data. Now, where does analytics fit in all of this? Honestly, to do the secondary data and the primary data, we don't need a whole lot of analytics or the kind of program that we have signed up for. Where we actually use a lot of analytics is to use a third type of data, and which is neither the primary nor the secondary, and those are the unusual sources of data. Where the data is not collected by asking somebody, the data is not being generated through any transactions. It is certainly observing through various unstructured format. maybe satellite images, maybe voice patterns, maybe pictorial images or videos, or sensors giving some data. So now these are the unusual sources of data which people kind of use to solve problems which are traditional, certainly, also problems which one could not have thought about solving traditionally, because the kind of data that was required was no longer there. So one of the major contributions of analytics is not only the tools and techniques they use, but also the unusual and the new sources of data which people use, and then and they try to do the analysis based on that. Now, in this program, of course, we will be doing some amount of unusual data, but what we will be focusing primarily on is on the analysis once the data is kind of there. And I'm going to talk about in a lot of details about the data analysis, that what are the various modules which we have broken the program into, and what goes in each of the module, what are the kind of domain expertise which we plan to incorporate, and at the end of the module, what are the things you are supposed to be good at, and what are the things which you are supposed to be able to do. That's what I'm going to talk about. The final thing in the analytics journey is implementing your solution. This is an important point in an analytics exercise, and this is what it distincts it from a pure research work or a pure research output. When we do a pure research output, the kind of techniques which we use are probably even more quote unquote deeper than what we do in a typical analytics domain. But we are never worried about the research output, how is it going to look like, or how is it going to be useful. In other words, the same problem when we do from a research point of view, the output is usually maybe 20 pages paper with a lot of complex equations, nicely typed in Times Roman 12 font, and that's it. Maybe spiral bound for good effect. But when we are solving a problem in analytics, that's not how your client would want to see the output. The client would want to see eventually something which is visually very appealing, probably as a software code which can be run in the system and will generate output, or maybe an app. So the implementation is an extremely important part in an analytics solution. Now, in this program, however, we are not going to talk about implementation, because implementation is not so much about the data analysis or analytics techniques per se. It is more about the coding, it's more about the computer science or developing apps. So that's the part which we are not going to focus on this program. But I want you to keep this in mind, that whatever analysis or results which we get, eventually you must keep in mind that once I have done that, how am I going to implement it for the client or for anywhere.